What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Breaking Bet here on this Sunday, May 17th. End of the regular season for college baseball. It was an eventful year, but the best is yet to come. As Frank Sinatra said, we have a big week of conference tournaments ahead of us. There's been some pretty interesting odds that have come out. All I've seen is on DraftKings so far, but let's break down those conference tournaments here, starting with the SEC. So got the odds here down below. We're going to bring up the tournament. So obviously it's a little it's a little small, so try and zoom in there for you guys. Now, obviously the top 4 seeds, they earn that double bye. That's Georgia, Texas, A&M, and Alabama. Now, with the odds below, there's clearly a gap here. And, I do want to state, it doesn't matter what conference you're in. Just because you're a team, say like Georgia, that already won your regular conference, they're going to be locked in to be a national top 8 seed, hosting a regional and a super regional, doesn't mean they're taking this weekend off. Doesn't mean they're going to take it easy. But, there's a lot of, I want to say, moving parts, especially in the SEC. There's teams that we've seen in recent years that have started in that first round and really had to fight through to make it even to the semifinals. And there's teams like an LSU, for instance, where their only shot to make it into the field of 64 is to win the whole thing in the SEC conference tournament. So let's take a look, right? Obviously, you have Georgia. They're sitting pretty at the top here. Probably going to face the winner of Mississippi State and likely Ole Miss. That's an interesting one. Mississippi State took the series from Ole Miss. Mississippi State could be interesting against Georgia because if they get past Ole Miss without having to throw Thomas Valinkis, then they have him against Georgia. But we've really seen Mississippi State cool down, in the back half here. It's not been a team that I've been overly impressed with. And, they're kind of gotten cold at the wrong time. So I think Georgia probably would win that one. Then he moved down. Vanderbilt, in the SEC especially, that mark to make the tournament has usually been 13 SEC wins in previous years. Now there's being talks that 13 wins might not be good enough this year. You got Vanderbilt and Kentucky kind of in that same boat right there. Regardless of who wins that one, I think Florida is going to win that second round matchup and face Alabama. Now, Florida-Alabama is a really interesting series. I like that one a lot. But if we're projecting that matchup, I would think probably Aiden King. Should Florida beat the winner of Vanderbilt-Kentucky, I think Florida is going to get past and go to Alabama. And if Aiden King's throwing that game, which I think he would, I like Florida there, man. I think Florida's got a lot of juice, just right under 10-1. I think they would take down Alabama, who has been playing really well, and ultimately face Georgia. Those two are going to put on a really good series, Georgia and Florida. And then below, Tennessee, I think, is a bit of a sleeper here. But then they would have to face Arkansas. And I'm really fond of Arkansas. They're 17-1 out there. I think that's a great bet. And honestly, the way Texas has been playing, they're winning series, but a lot of injuries. They don't look as in sync as they were earlier in the year. And I still like them to win the College World Series. I'm not backing down on that. I just think in this format, they're locked into a top 8 seed and they're more interested in resting their guys. So I'm not jumping in on Texas, especially at the favorite price. So I think Arkansas is going to get to that game against Texas. Now, obviously, it's a Friday game. I'd imagine Dylan Volantis is going to go, and that's really tough against Arkansas. But if Arkansas is able to get past that game, I think it's going to get really interesting. And then I don't care who wins between Oklahoma and LSU. I think Auburn gets through, plays A&M. Auburn played A&M really well earlier this year, almost swept them at Aggieland. So I think Auburn gets through there. Ultimately, I like Arkansas and A&M, or Arkansas and Auburn, to match up on that semifinals. And I like Florida and Georgia to match up. Now, if Liam Peterson is what he was this past weekend, then Florida's going to be a really interesting College World Series ticket to have which I have. Georgia's playing great, but at their odds, they're 4-1. I mean, I'm not rushing in on that, but Florida's just under 10-1, like I said. Honestly, I like tickets on both Florida and Arkansas here. The SEC is definitely tough. Like I said, we could see one of these teams, maybe like a Tennessee, surprise and make that run. But I think if there's two teams to bet, given the possibility of the path and how things shake out and what the numbers are, I think it's going to be Arkansas and Florida, one team each side of that bracket there. So let's go with those two teams. And we're getting Arkansas at 17-1, which I think is a little bit big. And if they get past Volantis, it's pretty good. Arkansas is red hot. Like, this is a team that's been trying to fight for a hosting seed in the regionals the last few weekends. Got my boy Crutch. So for postseason, I know season always goes fast. I feel like I say it about any single sport. It's been an interesting year, but I think if you're looking to really get a solid bet down, Arkansas 17-1 is a great price. The big if, assuming they get past Tennessee or South Carolina, is if they can beat Dylan Volantis in Texas on that quarterfinal Friday night game, which, obviously is very difficult. But if they can get past that, I think there's a really good shot that they're going to at least make it to the finals. And then I think Florida's interesting, like I said, 9-1. As great as Georgia is, if Florida's pitching does what it's capable of, they're more than able to steal a win against the Bulldogs. So Florida 9-1, Arkansas 17-1. Two bets I would definitely make here for this SEC tournament. Now we move on here. ACC is a little bit more difficult of a bracket to really dissect. Obviously, if you followed me preseason, you saw the articles, you saw the podcast, like Georgia Tech 8-1. I grabbed that immediately at open. Immediately, I said that's way too long of odds. It's hard to win a conference back-to-back years, but Georgia Tech, man. Hell of an offense. They had the offense everybody thought they did. Their pitching at times looked really good. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they had the best conference ERA as a team. So, some of the question marks about the pitching, at least on paper, have been answered. What that looks like in the tournament format in June is a different story. But for this particular weekend, they're really short of odds. Not that I don't think they can win or will win. Virginia looked interesting to me in that 17-1 range or whatever it was, but I just don't know if they have the pitching. So let's say Georgia Tech gets past that collection of NC State, Duke, or Virginia, which I think they will. And they move to the semifinals. Then they'll have to play the winner of Cal Stanford against Miami against Boston College, which I think they probably win. It's a relatively good matchup. Boston College is interesting, but they'd probably throw AJ Colarusso in that first game. Again, they get the double bye as the top four seeds do. I thought Miami was a sleeper here. I just think without Daniel Cuvée, that's a tough one for Miami. Their pitching is interesting, definitely interesting. Like, I thought maybe to take a sprinkle on that. So I have my eye on Miami, but I don't know if I'm pulling the trigger there. Then if you go down, Notre Dame, Clemson. I mean, the only interesting thing about Notre Dame is if they can get past those first two games and then get to the quarterfinals against UNC, and then they can have Jack Riddell, then they're interesting. Because the thing you have to realize, the first round, the second round, like those games that are Tuesday or Wednesday, like you need a lot of pitching to get through this tournament, especially if you're starting in that first round. A lot of pitching. But if somehow Notre Dame can survive and get to that Friday game against UNC, they'll have Jack Riddell. Therefore, they'll have a shot to advance to the semifinals. But I'm not banking on that. I think just kind of based on the matchup, it's probably going to be UNC. Maybe Virginia Tech gets past and they get Brett Renfro and he throws a gem. Like that's all possible, but it's unlikely. So let's say Georgia Tech advances, UNC advances. Maybe Miami beats Boston College and advances. But I think the team that I think is probably the biggest wild card, bang for buck wise, is going to be Wake Forest. Louisville Pitt winner on Wednesday. Wake Forest, the pitching lab, the team that broke my heart a few years ago, they've had this surplus of pitching, and they have so many talented arms, and they have guys that have really developed and come out these last 3-4 weeks. I think Wake Forest is probably the best bang for buck bet in the ACC field here. They're plus 950. So if they win that game against Louisville or Pitt, which we expect, then they play FSU. Probably would have to deal with Wes Mendez, who's had a really good year. I think Florida State's interesting, but what does that loss without Miles Bailey look like? And in truth, you're going against Chris Lavonis, maybe the best pitcher in this conference. And FSU, once they lost Miles Bailey, I just felt like their shot was probably gone. But they're still fighting, hanging in there. They had a good season. But I think Wake Forest would beat FSU against Mendez with Chris Lavonis. And then it becomes, what does Wake do against UNC? Because UNC obviously can pitch, but at plus 950, I think it's interesting. And then, you get Georgia Tech and Wake in that championship matchup. Like Wake, they showed a lot of fight against Georgia Tech a month ago. I don't know. I think if you're going to make a bet, you could bet Georgia Tech. That's not a bad bet at plus 160, I guess. But really, the meat and potatoes is Wake here, in my opinion. Time baby style. What's going on, man? How we doing tonight? So I think Wake Forest is probably the best bang for buck. I'm not in love with this conference tournament. I just don't feel like the field is that strong this year. I feel like obviously Georgia Tech is Georgia Tech. UNC's had a great year. FSU, they're not invincible. I just think Wake is very much a wild card because they have a lot of boppers on offense. They have a top-tier stud pitcher who's probably going to go top 10 next year, maybe top 5. Now with the injury to Dax Whitney, he might be the first arm off the board next year. We don't know. But I think that's probably the direction that I'd be looking at is Wake Forest possesses, a path that's winnable, and they have the firepower to do it on both the mound and at the dish. All right, let's move on here to the Big 12. The Big 12 is always fun, but, baseball fans know we got robbed, man. We got robbed. The Big 12 tournament, all these years at Arlington where the Rangers play at Globe Life, it was cinema. That was Martin Scorsese, absolute cinema. And it's no more. Now it's in Arizona. Boo. I don't like it. I got to be honest. There's 2 teams I'm looking at here too. I would be surprised if one of these 2 teams don't at least make the finals. But I'd also be surprised if one of these 2 teams don't win it. Oklahoma State. What's about OK State? This is a team that there was a very strange feeling coming into the year. It's a team that in the Big 12 was always kind of like slept on, and we feel like, that might be the wild card team, right? Like if they host a regional, they're going to be good. And every year they just seem to fall flat on their faces once they get into June. And, this year it was a lot of what ifs because they lost Nolan Schubart. They lost a couple of key pieces, and they had to really rely on guys to step up. And I mean, Jesus H. Christ on a cross. They're right up there with Georgia in terms of home runs hit this year. I mean, Colin Ritchie, he had a good year last year, but this kid was like him and Tage Davis had good years last year, and then they just soared this year. He's about to hit his 30th home run. Colin Ritchie, batting almost 350. And he's just one of 6 or 7 guys in double figures in home runs. OK State's pushing 150 home runs as a team. That's insane. Now with OK State, they're going against UCF. UCF's interesting. They're no pushover. They're a good team. I like them. But I just think with how hot Oklahoma State is right now, that's not a team I'm looking to bet against. I am not looking to bet against Oklahoma State. So I think they win that game on Thursday. And then I don't think any one of those teams is probably going to beat Kansas. So they'll probably play Kansas. Now, Kansas cashed another one for us. Preseason 11-1, that was ludicrous. We saw it on the pod, on the articles, like Kansas was the 11-1 pick. They come home for us. Fantastic. And they've had an unbelievable year. Now I really like Kansas, but considering, the price they're at, like I wouldn't be betting them. And, in all fairness, like look how hot OK State is. Like I just said, like that's a real opportunity that Oklahoma State can put it on Kansas. And, maybe that's a Don Bagley game, or, if they saved them or they threw them on Thursday against the winner of Texas Tech, BYU, Baylor, maybe. But in any case, I like what OK State has. And, their pitchers have been really getting hot. Ethan Lund has had a crazy year. He's got an ERA in the 5s, but he's got 119 Ks in like 70 innings. Noah Wecht, he's come on strong. Hudson Barrett's come back. He's starting to get into the groove. Like they have pitchers that are heating up. So they're a very interesting team entering the month of June, entering this tournament here. So I think OK State's going to get past UCF and Kansas and get on to that finals on Saturday. But now on the bottom side, K-State, Utah, whatever. Play TCU. The only interesting thing about that TCU game, TCU just played West Virginia. That was an interesting series. West Virginia won. Now, if TCU can get to that game on Thursday, maybe they throw Tommy Laporte, because TCU is one of these teams that's like, hey, it's questionable if they're in. Tommy Laporte, interesting, against West Virginia, but West Virginia, they look good. They look good. Their pitching is Chance Cole, Maxiel, Ian Korn. Like they got some dudes. They're playing good ball right now, the Mountaineers. It doesn't matter. I think they're going to get through. And, Arizona State, if they beat Cincinnati, like the big thing I wonder, like what the Cincinnati-Arizona State game is interesting because is it going to be Nathan Taylor against Cole Carlin, which, by the way, that's a big-time pitching matchup. Maybe Cole Carlin gets saved if Arizona State wins that game and plays Friday. Now Cole Carlin's against West Virginia. That's interesting. Like these are some of the variables that I'm talking about. If a team can get past and they save their high-priced arm, now these matchups become very, very intriguing. Like Landon Harrison's had an unbelievable year. Nevertheless, though, West Virginia, like Oklahoma State, really hot right now. So I think the two bets that I'd be making right around, the same sort of thought process. Like West Virginia is the favorite at, I think, plus 370. I would probably be taking a piece of both West Virginia and OK State. And like I said, I would be more than surprised if at least one of them wasn't in there. But I could very well see them match up against each other in that championship game. So, I mean, you take a one-unit play on both of them, you're going to be profitable. That's how I would play the Big 12. I think it's very, very intriguing. I'm really curious to see how that Cincinnati-Arizona State matchup goes with the pitching. But ultimately, I can't bet against West Virginia right now. Same with OK State. So probably would be looking to take a piece of both of them. Or plus 320 for WVU and 6-1 for OK State. Which, by the way, like DraftKings right now is the only book I've seen that has odds on these. So maybe we get more tomorrow. But I think for right now, that's what I'm looking at. I'm even wondering if I want to do 2 units on West Virginia and 1 on OK State. And then that way you're kind of in a similar position in terms of profit if they both get to the finals. I mean, you have a winner. UCF is good, but they're a little unpredictable. Cincinnati, Arizona State, kind of the same thing. And then after that, I'm not really looking. All right, Big Ten bracket. So I think for the Big Ten, which, by the way, I know this is probably the most legible and clearest picture we have. I guess I just downloaded the worst pictures. I mean, if you look at the odds here, obviously UCLA is the favorite. It's hard to gauge a team's interest level, especially for UCLA, right? Like they're the number 1 seed. It's highly unlikely they're going to get booted. But then for John Savage, like it doesn't seem like the coach that's going to take it easy for a week just because They're locked into the 1 seed. They're probably going to get a layup of a regional. Like, no, you want to stay hot going in. So I'd imagine he's going to continue to, play like he normally has. Interestingly enough, I only think there's probably 2 bets to make. UCLA, which at that point, I don't even know if I'm that interested in betting UCLA at damn near even money, where they'd still have to win like 3 games. And I'm kind of interested in a long shot here. Ohio State, 22-1. Ohio State, they've won their last 3 conference series. They're playing good ball right now. Very interesting. They're kind of clicking. And I'm not saying they're a great team, but this is one of these programs that really could benefit from winning the Big Ten tournament, which, by the way, is being played in Omaha. So for a team like UCLA, possibly if one of like Oregon or Nebraska or USC miraculously made it, this is like a nice warm-up before they'd have to play there in about a month. But I think Ohio State at 22-1 is interesting. So the way it looks, they would have to beat Washington, which is feasible. Then they'd have to beat the winner of Michigan-Rutgers, which is not impossible. Then it looks like they'd go down and play Oregon. I don't love Oregon. I don't really think Oregon's that good. But, Ohio State could theoretically win that game. They have a couple of guys in terms of starting pitchers that are interesting. Then if they won that game, then you'd probably have to beat Nebraska. It's a long road for Ohio State to get out of there. But at 22-1, it's worth like a quarter unit sprinkle. But otherwise, I think this is probably going to be a UCLA win. And in that case, I'm not looking at bet plus 115, for them to have to win like 3 games. I think there's better ways for you to spend your money than betting UCLA, in my opinion. All right, Sun Belt time. Sun Belt time. I got to bring that up. Give me 1 second. All right, so for the Sun Belt, this is a little bit more complicated. They have a lot of moving parts here. I was really interested in ULL at 13-1. They're a feisty group. They're not called the Raging Cajuns for no reason. 13-1 is interesting. But, they'd have to get past, I believe, Coastal. They'd either have to get past Coastal or Southern Miss after playing Marshall in game 1. I mean, it's worth like a little sprinkle. But in truth, I'd probably, if they get past Marshall, then I'd probably rather just take a shot on them straight up if they played Coastal or Southern Miss out of the gate. But otherwise, I don't really see a ton of value in this market here. Southern Miss, they've been the most consistent team in the conference all year. So if you want to bet them at plus 180, maybe parlay them with UCLA if that was something that you were interested in. I don't necessarily love it. Maybe I'll take a shot on it, but it's not the first thing that I'm rushing to. I just think Southern Miss has probably been the most consistent team. Maybe if you want to take a shot on Coastal Carolina, at plus 260, Cam Flukey's coming back, or he's been back the last few weeks, and he's starting to ramp it up and, in an effort to be right and be himself for the month of June. But that's probably the way I'm looking at it. In all fairness, I'd be surprised if it wasn't either Southern Miss or Coastal. It could be appealing if you took 2 units on each, and most likely would come away with a profit, barring a disaster, but not a huge one for me. And then Conference USA, which, by the way, these are the only ones that were offered this evening. This one might be a little bit blurry. Apologies. It's a little blurry, but For me, I think Southern or not Southern Miss. I feel like for the Conference USA, Jacksonville State's been a great team. Like Liberty's got a stud and Ben Blair, Mizzou State, Caden Bogenpole. Like, they got some good teams in this conference. But I still, for some reason, just can't take my eye off DBU at plus 550. Dallas Baptist. It's always a team that you can never completely turn away from. I just feel like plus 550 is relatively interesting. This is a team that can go toe-to-toe with anybody in this conference, despite how the regular season shook out. And, they didn't really come that close to winning the regular season. But if there's one play here for me, I think it's going to be Dallas Baptist plus 550. I'll probably look to take that. Ultimately, the way it looks, sometimes it just comes down to the draw. But DBU has a lot of talent still, and I think I'd probably look just to deflect to them. But this will wrap up the conference preview show. We'll be doing a podcast next week. We'll start highlighting the matchups in the regionals once we get them. Towards the end of probably this time next week, we'll get those odds, we'll get those matchups, and really have something concrete to break down and, put any futures tickets in that you might have missed throughout the year or waiting for those matchups to really be finalized. But I will say this for anybody listening, it's not a bad time right now to be grabbing some of these tickets on teams that you find like, hey, I want to get a taste down on them. A team I just re-upped, a team I had something on earlier this year, preseason as a matter of fact. I was like, you know what? I got to get a little bit more on them. Florida Gators, 45-1. If Liam Peterson, like I said, pitches the way we saw last week to his capability, we know what Aiden King's doing. Caden McDonald, his emergence after coming back from TJ. They have a couple of other guys. Right now is great at the back end of the pen, and Sandifer and Walls and Barbary, et cetera, et cetera. If all those guys go to their capability, and now Florida's offense is starting to get cooking, I think the Gators are interesting. 45-1 is a great ticket. That's probably the one and only long shot that I'd be looking to take, the Florida Gators. But appreciate everybody for tuning in tonight. We will lock back in next week, and I'll be giving out some picks throughout the week. So stay tuned and have a great rest of your evening.